Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Hundreds of people marched through Lethbridge recently to honor and remember those who lost their lives at residential schools. A southern Alberta city is still reeling following a tragic house fire where 7 people lost their lives. And we hear from a Christian organization which is helping people rebuild their lives following devastating flooding in Arkansas.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The BC Coroner Service says 2 bodies have been found following a fire that tore through the village of Lytton, BC last Wednesday. Officials say some people remain unaccounted for, in large part due to the hasty evacuation of the village last week. The BC Wildfire Service shows the wildfire has grown steadily since late Friday. Fire crews are working to stop the spread of the fire towards Spence's Bridge and to stop it from crossing the Fraser River. Fire departments around Lethbridge were kept busy over the long weekend. Early Sunday morning, crews from 4 different stations responded to a large grass fire with several buildings and haystacks involved on the city's west side. Crews from Lethbridge, Coaldale, Colehurst and Picture Butte were on scene near Cottonwood Park to battle the blaze around 1:15 a.m. on Sunday. One firefighter was taken to hospital but was released a short time later. Crews are reminding us with the extreme hot weather over the past week, grass conditions have become very dry and a small flame or spark can quickly grow. On Wednesday, crews from Lethbridge and Coaldale responded to a massive blaze at Green Prairie International just east of Lethbridge shortly after 7 p.m. The blaze involved a 58,000 square foot warehouse. The estimated damage is around $5 million. Crews remained on scene for several days to monitor hotspots. Fortunately, no injuries were reported. And early Thursday morning, Coaldale, Lethbridge and Picture Butte fire crews were called out to multiple vehicle blazes at the Lethbridge County Yard just north of Coaldale. Mutual aid was provided by surrounding departments as crews were tied up at the Green Prairie fire. The cause of all 3 blazes is still under investigation. Battling these blazes, especially in the extreme heat, has been tough for our first responders. Many areas across Western Canada have been setting record hot temperatures. So our poll question this week is, do you enjoy summer temperatures above 30 degrees? Make sure you log on to our website, bridgecitynews.ca, and let us know your thoughts. We'll tabulate the votes and have them for you on Friday's newscast. Hundreds of community members marched through Lethbridge on Canada Day to honor and remember those at residential schools. The findings of over 1,700 unmarked graves have been uncovered over the past few months. As Carson Marzouk reports now, organizers of the rally say it's time for a change.
Hundreds of people braved the heat on July 1st to show their support for the Indigenous community following the discovery of unmarked graves at former residential schools across Canada. The group gathered near Henderson Lake before making their way on foot to Galt Gardens. The event was organized by 2 women, one of them being Ava Mountain Horse. She says the idea behind the awareness rally was to help educate the community while mourning the children who weren't able to return home.
It was so important because with Lethbridge, when I was younger, I used to deal with bullying because I was Native, and people just didn't really understand, and they were uneducated, and we want to help educate people so that they understand why we're mourning and why we're hurting and why we're not celebrating on Canada Day.
Co-organizer Kalita Daychief says the awareness rally originated with 5 girls, but quickly grew once it was made public.
My heart is just feels filled with all these people. I'm honestly surprised. On my end, I only knew a few people were coming. I didn't know it got spread out this much.
The rally saw people of all backgrounds and cultures join in solidarity for the Indigenous community. Following the march to Galt Gardens, members joined together in song, prayer, and a moment of silence. Attendees say the reason they came out was to show that it is time for change.
I'm not happy. I'm in mourning, but these stories needed to come out. This needed to happen. We needed a change because as Indigenous people, you could see that we were struggling, No one knew why because our history wasn't ever taught. I remember going to high school and only being taught a little bit of the Indian Act.
A candlelight vigil and car rally were also held to honor and remember those lost. Tatiana Weasel Moccasin says another strong message being shared at Thursday's rally was that the Indigenous community is there for one another.
To my relatives, across Turtle Island. Igakima, try hard. We're praying for you. We're all praying for you. We know this is a hard thing, and we've been speaking up about this, so keep going.
For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marsouk.
Meanwhile, in Winnipeg, statues of two queens on the grounds of the Manitoba legislature were toppled during a Canada Day rally over the deaths of Indigenous children at residential schools. The statues of Queen Elizabeth and Queen Victoria were tied with ropes and brought down.
People in our community walked in support of Indigenous peoples, and in particular in support of those impacted by residential schools. Now, there were two walks organized by separate groups yesterday, and we were in contact with organizers from both groups days in advance of yesterday's walk. We collaborated with the organizers to ensure that everyone could safely participate and move to their intended locations. These events were intended to be peaceful demonstrations of solidarity, and the vast majority of the people who attended were peaceful. Now, the risk for us and the risk to any large gathering is that there may be some within the crowd who have a different agenda. And that is what we witnessed at the end of the afternoon when a small number of people determined to damage property on the grounds.
Alpha House Lethbridge hosted a memorial on Monday to remember and honor the lives lost to addiction and homelessness here in our city. Members from Alpha House, Sage Clan, and the community gathered in Galt Gardens before walking to the shelter where a small ceremony took place. Indigenous Cultural Coordinator at Alpha House, Wade Maud, says the memorial allows people to go through the grieving process together.
That gift of some kind of closure, even though there's oftentimes a lot of unsaid words or unspoken feelings that have been between people, but it gives those that are still here the opportunity to share in their vulnerability with each other, to approach some type of grieving process, because this is very important. And in that, you know, a lot of people that are in these situations, they've never really been given that tool, you know, of how to grieve. And through that grieving process, you grow through that process as well and gain some insights and some strengths to be able to carry on.
The names of roughly 20 individuals that Alpha House was made aware of were read off during the memorial. The province announced that beginning this fall, hundreds of students will have new opportunities to gain paid on-the-job experience in sectors such as construction, technology, and life sciences. The 3-year pilot program will be a partnership with industry, employers, and post-secondary institutions to allow students to learn directly from seasoned professionals and mentors. If you know someone who's interested, you can contact participating industry associations until 2023. Officials say if successful, the pilot program will be expanded into new sectors. Barbecue lovers here in southern Alberta have the chance to indulge in something very special this weekend. The Lethbridge and District Exhibition, along with Hickory Street, are bringing the Smoke, Wind and Fire Master Series barbecue competition to our city this weekend. The first Kansas City Barbecue Society competition will be in Lethbridge thanks to the easing of restrictions. Exhibition CEO Mike Workington says they're hoping to grow the event over the next few years.
We do think, though, in the future, with our proximity to the U.S. border, the time in the schedule where we are, that this event has the opportunity to grow significantly for southern Alberta, showcase the production that goes on here, specifically with pork production, but also just really be a tourism draw to the community. I've said all along, we're a business that brings the community together, and for us to be able to do that in a safe and responsible way is of the utmost importance. And so we've been waiting for this for 16 months to bring people back to the park, and so we couldn't be more thrilled with the opportunity to do so and drive some much needed business into the struggling tourism economy.
Anyone can attend the 2-day event on July 10th and 11th to try out fresh barbecue and learn some tips and tricks from the competitors. The Calgary Stampede is set to kick off on Friday, and this year the celebrations will be making its way to Lethbridge. The Lethbridge and District Exhibition will be one of 4 cities across the province hosting the Fireworks Spectacular show this Friday. The 14-minute event will occur simultaneously and a synchronized musical soundtrack. Exhibition CEO Mike Workington says the fireworks display will add another celebration-type event to the summer.
The Stampede actually reached out with the idea of doing a province-wide fireworks spectacular. And it's something from the minute they contacted us, we needed to figure out how to do this because we needed to be able to bring this type of event back to the community. And so it's something that we've worked on for the past couple of weeks since we did know that the restrictions were going to be lifted, and to put together a really special event. Obviously, fireworks are traditionally a major part of Canada Day here. They are a part of the Whoop Up Day celebration later in the summer, but we wanted to make sure that we were extending the celebration throughout the summer. And so to be able to do this to kick off the Calgary Stampede province-wide and mark the unofficial reopening of the province with the kickoff of the Stampede, it's something that we felt we had to be a part of.
The show will be held at the Rocky Mountain Turf Club starting at 11 p.m. on Friday with limited seating. The mayor of Chestermere, Alberta, where 7 people died, including 4 children, in a house fire on Friday, says words cannot express the devastation in his community. In a statement, Marshal Chalmers thanked emergency responders for their efforts and thanked Albertans for their thoughts and prayers. The Islamic Supreme Council of Canada says special prayers were also held for the family at the Chestermere Islamic Centre. RCMP have said the cause of the fire is under investigation, but initial findings do not suggest that it was deliberately set. People who were evacuated after a train derailed in central Alberta are now back home, and Canadian Pacific Railway is investigating what caused the wreck. Lacombe State officials say 22 rail cars were derailed along Highway 2A on Friday night. They were mainly carrying asphalt oil, and one rail car spilled 32,000 litres of tar oil. The city says no nearby residents or CP employees on the train were injured. The minister of an inner-city church in Calgary says he's in no rush to remove evidence of vandalism to the building that follows recent revelations regarding graves at residential schools. Grace Presbyterian was one of at least 10 churches hit in the city recently by vandals who splashed red paint across church doors. Minister Jake Van Pernis says what transpired was an act of protest and grief. He says the church is considering leaving it up in recognition of the lasting trauma of residential schools. Summer's here, and that means summer camps for kids. Now, even though the Alberta government has lifted most of the restrictions, the lockdown still impacted the planning for many camps, including those here in southern Alberta and the Southern Alberta Bible Camp. John Gartley is the executive director of the SABC. And John, you say you changed your focus more to family camps?
We're really excited about this, actually. We couldn't justify putting different kids from different family households in the same cabins. We couldn't do that. But we can put the same households in the same cabins. And so that's what we're running. We're running our first week right now. It's amazing.
Now, for those campers who are still concerned about physical distancing, will they have the opportunity at the Southern Alberta Bible Camp?
We're not made to socially and physically distance here. That's not what camp is about. And yet we are adhering to some of those things. And again, like I said, for those families that might be a little bit concerned about that, there's lots of space to.
Now, I know it's a little late in the game, but can families still register to participate in these summer camps?
No, we got lots of room yet in August. And one thing too, Hal, there's lots of funding available too. So if people can't afford the fees, there's subsidies available due to our generous supporters.
You know, John, I still have great memories from when I attended summer camp as a kid. Now, these camps can literally be life transforming. Now, you have an example of a child who was really touched attending your summer camp. Do tell.
These kids come from all walks of life, all different households. They come sometimes with a lot of pain and a lot of walls, and they spend time with them. And this one story that stands out to me, one of our kids would just sit on the side of the lake and just watch everybody else swim and watch her cabin leader throw the other kids in the water. And she just sat there. She was a bigger girl. And this cabin leader went to her and said, "Come on, I'll throw you in the water." She said, "You can't throw me in the water." No, she said, "Come on, I'll throw you in the water." She said, "You can't at all." And she said, "I'm going to throw you in the water." So she picked her up and she threw her in the water. And she said from that moment on and that week, that whole demeanor of that child changed.
That's amazing. Thanks so much, John. That was John Gartley, Executive Director of the Southern Alberta Bible Camp. Fully vaccinated Canadians and permanent residents who have had a full course of a COVID-19 vaccine will now be able to skip the 14-day quarantine. The Canada Border Services Agency says it is a cautious first step and warns would-be travelers will still be prohibited from entering the country if they were not eligible to travel to Canada before July the 4th. Travelers must use the ArriveCan app or web portal prior to departure to log their vaccination details along with the results of a negative coronavirus test that is less than 3 days old. Demolition crews set off explosives late Sunday to bring down the damaged remaining part of a collapsed southern Florida condo building. The mayor of Miami-Dade County said crews were cleared a short time later to resume their search.
It's clean. There wasn't even debris on Collins Avenue. It was amazing. We were able to get out there really fast and all clear for the crew to get back out on the mountains and continue the search. Honestly, this precise moment, I feel relief. I feel relief because this building was unstable. The building was hampering our search efforts. Really, we were stuck, that we couldn't get to a certain part of the pile. I've heard them say that they think there are voids in this area, areas where they'll be able to search. So I'm excited. I'm excited about that.
Now, the number of dead from the condo collapse has reached 27. More than 115 people are still unaccounted for, including 4 Canadians. Following massive flooding in Arkansas, Christian organization Samaritan's Purse is on site with their volunteers to help families during their time of need. We have more now in this report.
Samaritan's Purse is responding to some massive flooding here in Deshay County, Arkansas.
Without Samaritan's Purse, it would took a good minute to do all what has been done now.
As we've gone around the neighborhoods, a lot of people are struggling. Their homes have water in them. They're discouraged. They don't know what the next step is. And so volunteers have come in, and Samaritan's Purse has responded to try to bring hope to these hurting folks and give them what they need in their time of desperation.
These guys here that do the work for the Lord, that's awesome. I let you know that there's a God, and I really thank them. And so me and my wife got together and said, well, we will cook them lunch, and that's appreciation.
There are a lot of people who are still in need of help. Please consider volunteering. We need your prayers. As we minister to this community, the Lord will be lifted up and glorified.
In your precious name, amen.
Amen.
Many Canadians are growing wary of political extremism online. A number of times, there's so much more to the story. Alternative viewpoints on many hot-button issues are often being censored by mainstream sources. Miracle Channel's CEO Leon Fontaine says all Canadians should be concerned with a potential threat to freedom of information.
I want to invite the Bridge City News audience to tune in right after this broadcast at 6 p.m. Mountain for the premiere of my brand new series. You guys are already passionate about keeping Canada strong and free. I am too. That's why I wanted to create this new show, Return to Reason. I'm diving deep beyond just the quick headlines and offering some insight into this crazy world. So don't miss your chance to see the whole story and learn what you can do about it.
More information about Leon's new program can be found at returntoreason.tv. You can also catch the program through Apple Podcasts or on the streaming platform Corco. Well, it's nice to finally get a break from the heat with the small amount of moisture we've received here in southwestern Alberta, and there may be more rain on the way. Complete weather details are coming up. We had some light showers and lots of cloud cover here in Lethbridge today, a slight reprieve from the record heat wave we've been receiving. Tonight, a good chance of more rain developing with a low near 12. Tomorrow, it should be mainly cloudy with a high expected near 26. A slight chance of showers again on Wednesday with a high of 25. Thursday, more rain developing and the mercury dropping to 22. Friday, a high-pressure system returns, clearing out the clouds and giving us a high of 27 degrees. Saturday, lots of sunshine again and a high near 30. Sunday, a mainly clear sky is expected with a high of 28. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 25 and an average low of 10. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 2007 at 36 degrees, and the record low was a chilly 4 degrees in 2003. The sun rose at 5:31 and sets at 9:41. Let's have a look at how Tuesday is shaping up across the country now. Expect just a few clouds and a high of 26 in Victoria, BC. Partly cloudy as well and 25 in Vancouver. Light rain and 22 is on tap for both Calgary and Edmonton on Tuesday. Expect a mainly cloudy day and 21 degrees in Regina. A slight chance of showers and 20 for Saskatoon. It'll be mainly sunny and 22 degrees in Winnipeg on Tuesday. Toronto had a heat warning on Monday. Tuesday expect thunder showers and a high of 33. A good chance of rain and 27 for both Ottawa and Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, expect light rain and 29 in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Sunshine and 24 in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Lots of sunshine at 28 expected in Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, it should be partly cloudy and 21 degrees on Tuesday.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403-380-1779.
Cybersecurity teams worked feverishly over the weekend to stem the impact of the single biggest global ransomware attack on record. Officials say this recent attack was a worldwide collaborative effort.
What the federal authorities are very, very confident it was the REvil group, which is, it's not state affiliated with Russia. So, they don't believe it's the Russian quote unquote government or the intelligence agencies. It's a worldwide hacker affiliate or hacker associate, if you will, that has people all around the world. Believe me when I tell you, we are all over the 40 or so service providers and the 50 customers or so that have been impacted, all over me trying to help and do everything. But for those that aren't, it's scary for them because it's the unknown. Technology, IT, I think, is a net positive in the world. I think we'd all agree with that. It allows, it allows our modern society. As long as we want to keep a modern society, I'm not being dramatic. I mean, if we want to keep electricity running, if we want to keep, people want to be able to use Amazon, all that kind of stuff, this is the new world.
New data from the Bank of Canada shows improved business and consumer sentiments reflecting economic reopenings across the country. A recent survey by the central bank says most business owners across Canada plan to hire over the next 12 months as they foresee faster sales growth amid loosening restrictions. Some business owners, including restaurant owners, say they're not expecting a return to pre-COVID staffing levels for at least a year. Brookfield Business Partners has announced a deal to purchase recreational vehicle parts maker Dexco Global for $3.4 billion US. Brookfield is acquiring the Michigan-based Dexco from KPS Capital Partners. The company produces engineered trailer running gear and chassis assemblies. It has 50 production facilities and 50 distribution centers around the world. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 55 points on the day to finish at 20,281. The Dow was up 152 points to 34,786. The S&P 500 was up 32 points to 4352, and the Nasdaq was up 116 points on the day to 14,639. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.20 to 76.36 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 7 cents to 3.78 US. Gold was down 4 cents to 17.9173 US an ounce, and silver was even at 26.48 US an ounce. Wheat is at $365 per metric ton. Barley's also at $365. Canola's at $801, and corn is at $425 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $1.58 to $122. Feeder cattle were up 73 cents to $157.05, and lean hogs were down 8 cents to $100.23. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 81.06 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the mayor of the city of Chestermere, Alberta, where 7 people, including 4 children, died in a house fire, says words cannot express the devastation in his community. In a statement, Marshall Chalmers thanked emergency responders for their efforts and thanked Albertans for their thoughts and prayers. RCMP have said the cause of the fire is still under investigation, but initial findings do not suggest it was deliberately set. Keeping the lines of communication open is important for healthy family relationships. Now, that's according to the leader of a church in Medicine Hat. Pastor Gary Mason of Medicine Hat Family Church has some advice on how we can best improve communication with family members, especially our children. That Q&A with Jeanette Roche is on deck.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Downtown Farmers Market opens this Wednesday, July 7th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on 2nd Avenue South. It's open every Wednesday until September 15th. Support local farmers and enjoy delicious homegrown produce and homemade baking. Come and enjoy a free outdoor family-friendly play called The Risky Yet Rewarding Adventure of Pearl and Dot. Taking place throughout the month of July at Rotary Square outside of Casa, hear the globe-trotting adventure tale featuring wild comedy, zany characters, puppets, music, and so much more. Performances are Wednesdays to Saturdays at 10:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. For more information, visit hootenanny.ca. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Well, being a parent is a challenge in the best of times, but with the middle of COVID restrictions, that challenge seems to get a lot harder. Joining us today to discuss this is Gary Mason, pastor of Medicine Hat Family Church. Welcome to Bridge City News, Pastor Gary.
Awesome. Great to be with you. Thanks.
Absolutely. So are you hearing from parents in your community that COVID restrictions and kids having to stay home, not getting to socialize with friends, that it's causing more tensions in families?
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you think about it, I like to think a lot of times from a biblical perspective, being a pastor of a Christian church and everything. And so I think all the way back to Genesis, when God first created man, and he makes this statement, we always use it when it comes to marriage, but it really applies to everything, that it's not good for man to be alone. We were created for relationship. And when that gets limited, that causes problems. And our own mental health, let alone our children and what they're going through, the stress of all of that has created lots of issues for people, for sure.
Yeah, totally. Now, what advice do you have for parents to handle the conflicts that might be coming up with their children these days? Typically, we'll see raised voices, sarcasm, disrespect, etc. So what advice do you have?
Yeah, well, it comes back to relationship a lot of times. And are we building those relationships with our children? A lot of times, I suppose in the past, we all got so busy that things were going on. And sometimes even we had teachers and I like teachers, so not against all of that, but teachers, coaches, we left the raising of our children to them. And we didn't get involved in our own children's lives. And so I think that we have to make sure that we're maintaining relationship, we're maintaining conversations. I also think that we've lost the art of conversation in our society. We have cancel culture and all of that going on that people talk about and different things. But a lot of times we've lost the art of conversation, being able to listen with respect and speak with respect, right? And so within our homes, we should be creating an environment where we can have those conversations, and it can be a safe spot for our children to talk and everything, and keep those lines of communication with your children open, no matter what their age is. You got to keep that open. And especially as they get into their teenage and adolescent years, that's really important. So
I like that, open communication. And of course, when communication is open, of course, maybe things are going to come out that the truth comes out sometimes. So apologies can be key, right? And forgiveness. So is there a poor way and a better way to apologize?
Sure. There's always one of the things that I try to do with our we have 4 boys, and they're all from 16 to 22. And so as we've talked to them over the years, we try to get them to just accept responsibility in the apology. If you got to apologize and justify what you're saying, then the other person then takes it oftentimes as an attack on them again. And so what you want to do is just straight up take responsibility for your part of it. Even if you weren't to blame, maybe you weren't wrong in how it was done, but they felt wronged. They felt like, and so sometimes you have to apologize and just say, you know what, at least I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to come across that way. I didn't mean for, and so just take responsibility. If you're always justifying, then how much responsibility are you really taking? And that's a big deal in the conversation.
Very good advice. Now, teens and young adults, screen time is always up in their lives. But of course, during COVID time, social media use has risen even more significantly, hasn't it? So what would you say to parents as to how to set boundaries when it comes to screen time or social media use?
Well, I think it's twofold in some of that. Number one is are we checking the boundaries in our own life? And then are we talking about the boundaries with our kids, which goes back to relationship and conversation and talking to them, not just telling them here's the boundary, but telling them why the boundary's there. And there's lots of information online about the struggle that comes when there's too much screen time and what that does to us. And so to be able to stop and sit down and have that conversation, say, this is because I care about your own mental health and some of those things, and talking to them about, even as they grow and mature, and sleep patterns and overnight and all of those things, when flashes are coming on your phone and staying up all night, this doesn't help them with good development in their own process of whether it be mental health, physical health, all of that. And so to begin to talk about those boundaries, but to also display them in our own lives. Our house, at a certain time every night, the Wi-Fi goes off, and my Wi-Fi goes off as well as their Wi-Fi goes off, because the truth is that if that's true for their mental health, it's true for my mental health. And so we try to do those kind of things and have those conversations, apply the same things to our own lives and whatever. There's always exceptions, right?
Yeah.
One night you might stay up a little bit later and do some things, but there's certain things that we can do. And that's sometimes that's a difficult conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But leading by example, it's very smart. It's hard to do, though.
It is, because it's easy for us to get drawn in. I mean, social media we know now that a lot of it was designed actually to draw us in and to create almost an addiction within us, and all of that. There's lots of studies for all of that, so you can find that. But if you understand that, then you understand that I need to keep it in a place where it's not controlling me. And so if I do that for me, and I display that to my kids, and I tell them about the importance of that for both of us, then that helps.
That's very, very smart. Now, I think it's a given that your kids are likely to disagree with your boundaries, right? I'm not talking just about your kids, Gary, everybody's kids. They don't like those boundaries sometimes, even though they need them. So any practical tips on how to communicate effectively with your kids, with kids in general, on issues like this?
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great question, because a lot of people, they have those struggles, but that's where being a parent comes in, and not just being a friend, not just being, and that's a longer conversation, I'm sure. But the reality is we still have to direct and help. At certain stages, when my children were 3, then it was, don't touch the stove, it's hot. And I'd pull them away, and there was no question, there was no conversation. But as they grow, you have to begin to treat them differently. You have to begin to tell them why you're making these decisions. You have to begin to tell them not only why they're making the decision, but then give them an opportunity to make the decision and correct it if they're wrong, so that when the time comes and you're not around, they know how to make the right decisions, right? And so it's a process that goes. Now, if you haven't done that ahead of time, or you don't have that kind of a relationship with your children, I think you need to step back and begin to build that relationship. And always, there's a book that was written years ago. I think it was John Trent, I'm not sure. But he wrote a book called The 2% Difference. And it talks about, rather than making big, wide changes, let's just make a 2% change today until we have that, and then make a 2% change in a week or 2 or a month or whatever. And as you slowly move the needle over, you're going to change things over time, rather than doing something that's just, it's too hard on everybody.
Now, Gary, I might be old-fashioned, but is it still key for kids to play sports or out at the park, or maybe some board games, even if it's just with their siblings or a small group of friends outdoors?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's old-fashioned myself. I think it probably depends. I suppose if you all decided to go out and churn butter, that would be old-fashioned. But that's not what we're talking about. And so playing a board game or playing a video, sometimes, like every family day at our family, we play one on a Nintendo, I think it is. We played a Mario and whatever Olympics as a family, right? And then we do other things that day as well. But so we have this tradition that we've done on that day, and there are other days we might do something else, and sometimes we go for motorcycle rides. We all ride and stuff, and so I
Yeah, and your
think that
kids
it's
are
not
older,
a
so they can do that.
right,
Yeah.
but we played video games when they were younger. Now we do motorcycle rides now, but even when they were younger, they would sit on the back, right? So yeah, you have different things that you can do along the way. It's only old fashioned if what you're doing is old fashioned. The fact of spending time together will never be old fashioned. That's important for all of us, especially within the home, and especially right now when sometimes you're limited to your home. But getting out to the park as well with friends and having some time with them, outside, I think the limit right now is 10 people in a group. And so to be able to do that, that's really important as well, because they need that interaction. And you know what? I don't run with them like their friends run with them anymore. When they play football, I might play football with them, but I'm the guy that jogs now. I'm 51, so I'm the guy that jogs now. And so they need those guys around them too, and they need those relationships too. So
That's awesome. So a big part of parenting is the process of passing your faith on to your children, if you are a person of faith, of course. So how can we do this effectively?
I think at that point you've got to talk about living it out in front of them. I think you've got to allow what you believe to be seen in them and discuss it with them. Again, if I want to transfer something to them, I got to talk about it. I've got to then live it out and be real in front of them. If I'm struggling, as they get older, I even talk to them about my struggles and things, and as well as all the victories and all of that along the way. And so just allowing yourself to be real, allowing yourself to have that relationship and growing it with them. So
That's awesome. Now, with that said, how important is it for families to be part of a local church in order to thrive spiritually?
yeah, well, I'm a pastor, so I believe in the power of the local church, right? But I think community is really huge, and when you have a community that is working towards the same goal, like growing as Christians and reaching out and evangelizing, having what would you call it, compassion ministries within your community, feeding the hungry or clothing those who are poor, doing all those things, is reaching out in different parts of the world. Whatever it is that we're doing within the church and within those things, being together, doing that together with other people is really important. Actually, we've homeschooled our boys for a number of years, and one of the things that's really interesting in some of my studies of that was that the only time they spend all their time with people of their age is in school. As soon as you graduate school, you go to college, you get a career, you're in a job, you're with people of all different age groups. And so one of the things that you find is that if all they ever do is spend time with their age group, they actually lack certain identity strengths. They will have at times even identity crisis that they go through because they don't know who they are. Whereas when you get them into a larger group, a larger community with adults and everything, and those adults then endorse them and speak into their lives and have those conversations as well, adult endorsement for those young people brings more strength to their identity than their peers does.
That's amazing. And it's one of those things that you might not think about because, they tend to hang out with people of their own age group. But that is really
and
good advice.
And when you talk about family time and you talk about sharing your faith, what better way than to do that within the context of whether it be worship or listening to the word that's being preached or prayer and all of those things. Those are really intimate times. I think I don't think enough believers recognize the value of the local church. As a matter of fact, my 16-year-old, I shared a couple of the questions that we were going to go over today with a couple of my boys today. And my 16-year-old said to this question, he said, I don't think people realize the importance of that. And he's 16.
Wow. Spoken from the teen right there. Wisdom. We
Yeah.
can learn from them, can't we?
Oh man, I learn from them so much all the time.
I
You know,
bet.
and today's world is different than our world. We can't look at it and say, well, why aren't you like me? Or why,
Yeah.
man, it's just a totally different world, like it was for us with our parents.
Yeah, totally. So what do you say to parents who maybe feel that they've messed up already? It might be just too late for their kids at this point. Is it ever too late?
I don't think it's ever too late. I think that there's always opportunity. I'll admit that if you don't do it when they're young, or you did it really when they were young and treated them like they were 3 all the way till they were 23, then you have problems and there's things to overcome. But I think, again, you work on that 2-degree difference. You begin to make small changes in your relationship. You begin to reach out in ways until you build that relationship. Sometimes we see parents who want to really bring in a lot of controls and boundaries and do all that, but they don't have the relationship. Typically when somebody's telling somebody what to do and there's no relationship, a lot of times we could call that abuse even. And so certainly to a young person, that can feel like that. So make sure you build the relationship. Just take time wherever you're at to begin to build that relationship.
What fantastic advice. Thanks so much for being with us today, Gary, and for passing on your wisdom and knowledge.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I'll tell anybody that I can, anything I can help them with.
We've all heard the famous words from Jesus to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, it sounds so good, but sometimes, depending upon who the neighbor is, it may be a little bit easier said than done. Joining me now from Toronto to chat about this is Linda McGibbon. She's the Vice President of People and Culture for InterVarsity Canada and author of the book, My Vertical Neighborhood, How Strangers Became a Community. Linda, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. Really great to be here with you today.
Good to have you. Now, can you share a little bit about how this book came about? I understand you moved from a small town setting to a much larger, radically different area?
That's correct. I didn't set out to write the book. The book happened out of my life. So about 10 years ago, I was offered a transfer. I was working with InterVarsity at the time in the East Coast in New Brunswick, lived in the town of Moncton, New Brunswick. They asked me to move to Toronto, and I initially, like most East Coasters, said no. But the job intrigued me, and so I decided to make a shift. I was just about to turn 50 years old, so it was kind of a big life change for me. I lived in a house in a neighborhood in a rural, across the river from Moncton in a smaller suburb, and I made the move and ended up living in a condominium tower, about 26 stories on the shores of Lake Ontario. So a significant move just as I turned 50.
You know, I remember when I lived in Southern Ontario in Hamilton, I drove my kids all the way to Charlottetown, PEI, and back in 9 days. What an incredible adventure that was, a journey. But I do remember, Linda, when we stopped off in the Maritimes provinces, whether it was Halifax or we went to Cavendish Beach and PEI, the Maritimers were so friendly. I couldn't believe how friendly they were. And then when I came back to Southern Ontario, I'm like, wait a minute. And I'm in Toronto, they're not as friendly here. What's going on? Did you notice that as well? Small town compared to the metro center, people in the smaller towns are that much friendlier?
I would say yes and no. So, I'm a proud East Coaster, and I think we are a very friendly people. And Toronto is a huge multicultural city. So, yes, people dropped in on me more frequently, more easily, perhaps, because I knew them. And I think there is, in high rises in particular, perhaps a bit of a protocol that you follow because you live so close to each other. You try to be a bit more careful. But I don't know, I'm beginning to wonder if the friendliness factor has been decreasing all over the place. And so it's maybe a little harder wherever you live.
You know what's really sad is, it's very true. Here in Southern Alberta, when I used to live in Calgary, and I bought a house and I moved into this neighborhood, and I talked to my neighbor, he says, thank God you came out to say hi. I said, what do you mean? Well, the previous owner lived there 10 years, he never said hi to me once. I'm like, what? That's just, I can't even fathom that. That's unbelievable. Now, when people hear, love thy neighbor, what do you think that really means?
That's the question that I posed really when I started to write the story that's in the book. And I started to write the story within about 3 years of living into the story. And then I continued to write it for a long time. When I first came to Toronto, I came with the question, what would it look like to love my neighbors? Or what had happened if I followed this commandment? And then I started asking the question, what does love mean in the context of neighbors? And I can tell you some things that I don't think it means, or it doesn't mean in its entirety. I don't think it means in its entirety that you tolerate them, or that you notice them, or that you are kind to them even, or friendly, although it does mean all of those things. I think maybe a good place to start is 1 Corinthians 13, that beautiful chapter on love. Love is patient, love is kind, love perseveres. I think loving our neighbors is about seeing people, being present to them, treating them as sacred, treating them as really worthwhile. So it's a deeper thing than neighborliness, which maybe is a superficial hello, pass by on the street.
And I need to borrow your drill, or in the wintertime, I need to borrow your shovel, or maybe some sugar. That kind of helps too sometimes.
Yeah. Those are starting points.
So Linda, you felt a calling to really love your neighbor, especially those you shared an apartment building with. How did you go about doing this? And did people kind of freak out a little bit when you reached out to them? Did you jump out and offer a hug prior to COVID?
Yeah, no, that's not my style. I wanted to do it, and I moved into the building and began to think about how could I do it and how could I leave space for it. I joined the gardening committee in the condo. I would go to the condo Christmas parties, but I wasn't really brave enough just to invite people into my apartment. I was living alone. It was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. I prayed a lot. I was friendly, but it actually took a colleague of mine moving into the building, Rachel, as she's called in the book. And she had a similar value for meeting people and inviting people in. And I discovered, it's a lot easier if there's two people. So whether it's a family, a couple, or a couple of neighbors who get together, it became much easier if together we offered invitations to people, two people living in a building saying, oh, we're doing something together. Do you want to join us? Was a whole lot easier. And just for me personally, less risky than doing it on my own.
Maybe that's the key there, Linda. You're right, is to get involved in maybe a group, perhaps. Let's say it's not as intimidating. Instead of just inviting somebody over to your house, like you said, in a gardening group, getting involved in the gardening community. That way you can kind of get to know people in a different setting, right? A more comfortable setting with more people around.
Yeah, I think that's really true. It starts slowly, but I believe that living into the commandment to love your neighbor as Jesus gave it to us, it does actually take more than me alone. Jesus sent disciples out 2 by 2. We're taught so much to be in community, to be a people who go together. And it's just less tiring if you have a friend or a family member or a spouse or somebody who you can do that with.
What are some of the ways you discovered, Linda, to help people to bring down their walls, make it a safe place for people to really open up to you and be themselves?
I think a key is that I had to become a bit uncomfortable myself. So I couldn't be the person who had everything neat and tidy and never shared anything about myself or wasn't vulnerable, but I actually had to be truthful and honest with people. I had to meet them kind of on their terms. So I tell some stories in the book where I thought that I could spend an hour with a new neighbor, but ended up spending a whole day, which was far beyond what I was expecting. But giving the gift of time, said to somebody, I think I actually do matter to this person. I think asking questions of people, being curious, also is really helpful. People like to talk about themselves mostly. So if we ask them about themselves, start to learn and listen, and then ask more questions, I actually believe that also really helps people feel seen,
you get to know
heard.
them a little bit better too at the same time. But Linda, let me ask you something. How many of us do you think are really lonely?
Well, it's probably a pandemic just like the COVID pandemic right now. And, different parts of the world. In England, they created a minister of loneliness for the government. So I do believe that people are lonely. I don't think it's the only thing that people are looking for is companionship or friendliness, but I do believe that people feel increasingly isolated and increasingly lonely. I think it's a human condition. I tell stories in the book about my own sense of loneliness. Even though I have friends, I have family, I have good connections with people, but we will all feel it in some way at some time. in our life.
It doesn't it say in the Bible that no man is an island? I mean, no person should be an island. We need that human interaction. It makes it even more challenging during the pandemic with all of the restrictions and the lockdowns. What do you think it is, Linda, that our neighbors really need and what they're longing for, outside of sugar or maybe a snowblower?
Yeah. Another excellent question. And as I think about it, I think, wow, it's hard to stereotype. Some people do actually, and in my experience, some people wanted a really good friend that they could spend time with and do things with and have conversations with. Some people just wanted somebody who would check in on them every now and then, or be aware or help them move something. Some people want to have deep conversations, and some people do not. Some people just want, we did for a number of years a Monday night dinner where we just said, it's Monday night, it's the first night of the work week, you're back to, nobody wants to eat alone. So why don't we do Monday night dinners? And lots of people came to those Monday night dinners. I think people don't want to eat alone. They want to share a meal and talk about something. They want to laugh together. So people want to be noticed. They want to be seen. They want to be engaged with. But it's individual to each person. So again, that curiosity factor is pretty important as we get to know people.
So as you get to know your neighbor a little bit more and they want to have a deeper conversation with you, then all of a sudden you find out they have complete opposite interests to you. They're completely think different politically. They lean a completely different way. They may not be a Christian at all. In fact, they may even be an atheist. So how do you handle that situation? And they may even become a little aggressive in their conversation with you.
Absolutely. I think curiosity helps again, non-defensiveness, and just being prepared to be uncomfortable. Like I think in lots of situations I became uncomfortable, but then I want to ask the question, okay, why am I uncomfortable? Who is this person in front of me? Are they worth engaging with? Are they a real human person? Why do they think the way they do? What's going on with them? Asking those questions. Tell me what you believe. Why do you believe that? Can I tell you what I believe? It's really different than what you believe, but help me understand you. So I actually think it's engaging in conversation that's more than superficial, but not easy to do. Not easy to do.
I agree.
Helps to have friends to debrief with later.
And what's interesting too, sometimes I find out that people who've walked away from the church, walked away from Christ, are people who are hurting in a very big way, and they have that huge emptiness, that void that only God can fill. And so you have to understand where that pain and that suffering is coming from originally, so you can sympathize and be a sounding board and then be able to reach out to them in a loving way. Now, how about an offer to pray for someone? Have you ever been shot down in that regard?
Yes, I have. I have offered to pray for people and they've said, absolutely no, I don't want that. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Or you can pray for me by yourself, but don't pray for me like in front of me. That's really freaky. So generally, I don't know that anybody has ever said, don't pray for me on your own. Most people, even if they don't believe in God, well, if you believe in God, why not? Maybe, I don't know. So I think that I have had people say to me, oh, don't pray for me right now. And sometimes there's a story in the book where I actually go ahead and pray for somebody on a phone message. My friend Brian initially reacted with kind of horror that I had done that. But then he listened to the prayer and told me that it was helpful. So it's a risk to offer it, but I think it's a risk worth taking.
Yeah. Linda, once the provinces start opening up a little bit more and we have more freedom, for worshiping, getting together in larger groups in churches, and you want to reach out to somebody, invite them to a church, how do you go about doing that? Because sometimes that can be an uncomfortable conversation for you and for the other person.
Yes, I think it comes up in conversations because you're talking about something else. Or sometimes you just tell a story to somebody like, oh, I'm going back to church once church opens. I'm looking forward to it. I've had people say to me, oh, you go to church? Can I come with you sometime? And of course you can come with me. People are curious. So I think sometimes just telling people you do it yourself. I go to church. If you ever want to come with me, you're welcome to come. And maybe after things open up and people have been so isolated and have missed gathering together, people will have a little bit more interest in it, actually, as a place to go and be with people.
We need to be fed spiritually, and we need that human interaction, as you and I talked about. Linda, we only have about a minute left here. Any final thoughts on how to step out in faith, out of your comfort zone, and love thy neighbor?
Pray. You know, if you're afraid and nervous, I think that's a very normal way to feel. We all have fears about it, but take the commandment seriously. I think it's probably more necessary in our world now than we even could possibly imagine. And Christians know the command and probably should be following it.
Love thy neighbor as thyself. Amen. Linda McGibbon, she's the author of My Vertical Neighborhood, How Strangers Became a Community. Thanks for joining me today from Toronto.
Thanks very much.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.